wanted to just take a moment here to read through the Homes for All visions and values of who and what we are. We believe that community and housing are a human right, not commodities to exploit for profit. Land and housing should be collectively owned and controlled by communities. Land and housing should be developed in a way that is sustainable for the planet. And land and housing should be accessible, permanent, quality, and connected to the economic, social, and cultural networks and institutions. Racism and white supremacy have been the root of housing and land policy injustices in the United States, and fighting to end racism and white supremacy must be central to our fight for homes for all. So I don't have control to go to that. Okay. Right to the City has been very strategic in thinking around making sure we're thinking about a long-term game in our planning and in our connections with people. And so some of our long-term goals for Homes for All are to win millions of affordable community-controlled homes for low-income and communities of color, construct and advance transitional and transformative solutions to the housing crisis, to help build a mass movement for housing justice that is led by low-income communities and communities of color. And then our long-term goal is to shift the popular consciousness around land and housing and to build interest and support for transformative solutions to the housing crisis. Homes for All is made up of many different communities, many different organizations that all take different forms and ways of thinking about how to attack the gentrification and displacement that's happening in our neighborhoods and in our cities. And so coming together in formats like this allow us to cross-share with each other what is happening in our localities, and also connect to a vision and a value around making sure that homes really can be for all people.
Cool. Darnell, thank you. And I had meant to share, previous to turning it over to you, one of the other contexts for this is that clearly, as we know, the national the national terrain has shifted, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. We also really want to recognize and invite folks throughout the call to shift some of the to share some of the local victories that have happened, particularly around the election as well, so that we can acknowledge kind of some of the growth and victories that we are making. Sorry about that, Darnell.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. So that's our grounding for who Home for All is. And we're not going to go too deep into explaining this because we understand that there are folks on the call that really have some feelings and some thoughts. And so we wanted to open up with some discussion because those that may not know, Right to the City leadership, steering committee and leadership are coming together in a couple of weeks to have a strategic planning retreat to think about what we're going to be doing next and how we're going to insert our priorities and perspectives into the current situation in the moment. So we threw up on the screen there some questions for us to think about, and we're going to take about 20 minutes to share with each other and ask, how are you feeling about and understanding in this moment? And then what do you see as some threats and opportunities ahead? Does someone want to share with us how they're feeling about the moment? Is everyone muted?
Hi, this is Lydia from Boston. I'm feeling a lot of urgency to organize as much as we can, especially kind of take advantage of the first year or so when I think it's going to take a while for them, for the Trump administration to get their act together. And, I just feel like the local work that we're doing is really important. And then a lot of, the thing is, even though, it's terrible, that Trump won, there have been some really big victories at the local and state level. And so those are things that we need to really build on and kind of try to build our power, at the local level and increase it at the local level.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Hi, this is Karen from CPA Boston also. And I just want to add to what Lydia said, that actually in Boston, we won the Community Preservation Act, so there will be more funding for affordable housing. There probably will be a fight on, where that money go to is to the most vulnerable, or just like people in the middle. But we also won a state referendum, no one choose. So we stopped lifting the charter school cap, which is a step to privatize public education. So, so those are the things that we can build on. I mean, the fact that, we defeated question 2 is hopeful maybe, we can elect a non-Republican governor soon. And then I think in terms of the threats, I just came from a meeting with immigrant worker centers. I think there's a lot of fear in the immigrant community, particularly the ones that work with a lot of undocumented. And I don't think that we kind of like prepare for it. And there was a lot of particular concern about, like, we won DACA, which was good, but then we worry about what are they going to do with the information they collected through DACA. And I think similar to Lydia, the opportunity is we got to continue to build strong local work, and that's going to help safeguard us.
Thank you for sharing. I'm not following the chat box as much, but this one just popped up that some folks in Atlanta have had a great mayoral race, and they're happy about that. Well, and next year's mayoral race. Several of us on the call, I believe, have also just returned from facing race in Atlanta. And there were some key areas of concern that us as left formations and also just progressive people on the right side of this might want to start thinking about when we think about what our work is that we've done and how to capitalize on it, as well as visioning and thinking about new areas to concentrate on. And so when it comes to land and housing, we have done a great job of having some safety and defense protections. Are there proactive policies and things that can happen at the local level that may also have a national impact that we need to start thinking about? Are there other national mobilization efforts that need to happen? These can be some of these are threats that can stall us, particularly with President-elect Trump's thinking around who's going to head up HUD. We have to refocus ourselves on what is our agenda and not get circumvented by being in defense mode of Trump, because we could spend our time fighting Trump and really miss the opportunity to make a real difference on the ground for people. What is the local engagement and transitions that folks are having in their small towns that might give us opportunities that we didn't see before? And then how do we get back to our long game strategy? Because people are feeling right now that, okay, this man is in, he's got 4 years. Are we prepared for what happens after 4 years and that community that we're building and that community that we're trying to set up? Or will we have to deal with this again in 4 years? And then also philanthropy. This is a moment in a time in which the traditional ways in which grants are even given out and the way that our movement is supported, this is an opportunity to challenge that and look at alternative ways that we can think about how we are being supported through our institutions and what is the role of some of these institutions and granting organizations in making sure that communities are whole, that the rights and desires of communities are uplifted and held. So there were some really good conversations in Atlanta, and those that were there that are on the call, feel free to chime in and share. I'm shutting up now.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now. Hello.
Oh, hello. Wow. What's up, Darnell? It's Mike over in LA.
Hey, Mike. Nice to hear you.
Good to hear you too. So I just wanted to thank everybody for pulling the call together, and I know there's other folks from California up in the mix. For folks that don't know who I am, I'm with the East LA Community Corporation in Los Angeles. I think just to the broader question of how we're feeling in the moment right now, I think, like most folks, incredibly devastating to see, sort of what we didn't expect to have happen. I think a lot of us sort of have a reaffirmation that the two-party system, political process, continues to be out of touch with the communities that we work with, which are primarily undocumented. But on a brighter note, California, on a macro policy scale, I think did some really good things on the election. We won some really amazing things locally that will help create more affordable housing and finally create 10,000 new units of housing, permanent supportive housing for the homeless. And those two issues, those were LA-based measures that, similar measures in the past have failed terribly. And we had a huge majority of folks supporting both those measures, both in LA City and LA County. And then statewide, there were some really good statewide ballot initiatives that were passed. Legalization of marijuana. We extended the millionaire's tax to fund schools. So there was some good things, but I think it's just a reaffirmation that you're looking at the electoral map right now. If we're looking at it in the diametrical term or dichotomy, it's with red and blue, California and the West Coast, and then the Northeast Coast are in total bubbles. And I think that if we want to continue building a national solidarity movement, we really need to think long and hard about how we're going to tap into communities that feel like they've been left out. And I'm not saying we need to switch our strategy and start organizing more white people, but I am saying that because I've heard a lot of rhetoric from folks in the last week, that are disregarding and writing off, this populist revolt. as something that's not real, and it is very real, and I think we need to take it seriously and develop our strategies around inoculating that and transforming that. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a situation that's going to deepen the divides and deepen the racism and the xenophobia. And all these things that our community has been feeling already for a long time, but are now becoming a normalized thing in the national discourse. So I appreciate what's happening in the streets. We've been supporting and doing a lot of direct action, protesting, and then just having organizing conversations with a lot of groups in LA that are pulling, unlikely bedfellows together. So it's interesting to see. Trump is maybe the best unifier right now. He's been bragging about this for a while, but pulling together a lot of folks that I think wouldn't typically work with each other, and we're trying to figure things out. And I hope that that's happening in other parts of the country.
Thank you for that. While you were talking, I had a thought of, hearing from folks about, because you touched on what this moment means, and thinking about, the populist revolt. How are others feeling about that, and why is it significant, what just happened? Anyone else want to share? If you're muted, there's a little telephone at the bottom.
Hi.
If you click on that, you should be on unmute.
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Andrea from New York, from the Met Council on Housing.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi. So not only in New York, we're not only facing what happened on the national level to be a horrible result, but also on the state level with our state Senate, which controls New York City's housing laws. And so I think my organization and a lot of other tenant groups are trying to think about how we can get some of that energy from the streets and direct it at the state Senate, where hopefully we have some chances of changing some of the voting that's happening there in the meantime.
What do you see as opportunities and threats in doing that?
So I think the opportunity is now that there's lots of excitement and lots of people paying attention to what's happening on the electoral level, where before it went mainly unnoticed. And to sort of direct that energy as much as possible is our opportunity. And the threat is that we now are dealing with what appears to be a hostile state Senate. And we're going to have to figure out how to work with them, how to get people who would not generally vote for a Democratic leadership to now vote for a Democratic leadership.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in? I see folks are putting things in the chat box, which we'll make available after the call.
Hi, this is Christy from Philly. Can you hear me?
We can, Christy. How are you? Welcome.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, Christy, Women's Community Revitalization Project in Philadelphia. One of the unexpected opportunities that we ran into here yesterday. So in Philadelphia, we have a heavily Democratic city council, and we have been pushing to get more resources for affordable, accessible housing. I mean, for decades, but just a specific fight against displacement over the last 2 years. And we've gotten a lot of pushback, and suddenly the tone in the meeting yesterday changed with these Democratic city council members saying, oh my gosh, we don't know what kind of cuts are coming from the federal level. If we don't deal with stuff locally really fast, we're going to be really screwed. And so that wasn't something that I expected going in, and it feels like there is an opportunity to use the fear, not just that we have, but that also some of our Democratic City Council members have, to move them to take action when they've been stalling for a long time.
Okay.
What are folks hearing? Thanks so much, Christy. I'm going to respond to that in the chat box because I think it was really something I've been hearing from other folks in other sectors as well. What are folks hearing from your members as you're in the last 8 days, 9 days, as you've been talking to members, you've been talking to family members, you've been talking to folks in the community, right? I mean, that's where our strength is. So we want to lean on that. And we want to kind of see if we can pull some of that up and share with each other, you know, across the country, what the pulse of our membership is in the wake of this election.
Hey, y'all. This is Drew in Newark, New Jersey. We've been hearing a lot from our members. There's been a lot of fear and just kind of sadness almost, in particular at our preschool, which has 225 children in it, thereabouts, 80% of whom roughly are undocumented. So there's a lot of kids, preschool age kids, 3 and 4 year olds saying, is my mom going to be taken away from me? Where are they going to go? So there's a lot to do. I think then just some social, emotional work with folks and just try to allow them the place to share. We actually have a community meeting, a community conversation tonight, which will allow some of that healing to start, as well as some know your rights from some immigration attorneys. But at the same time, while there is this huge, huge challenge in front of us on so many levels that, I mean, we all know, there are some opportunities to channel these feelings and build power, build a base where get more people involved in the fight for justice. So I think that's what we're trying to do. It's gonna take a lot of work, but moving forward, I think that's something we need to do.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in? We got about 5 more minutes left on these questions. How are you feeling and understanding, you know, this moment? And then what do you see as threats and opportunities ahead? One of the comments that came from the chat box was this concern over HUD and some of the gains that we've made being rolled back. Does anyone see any opportunities or even, you know, want to lift up some major threats that we should be paying attention to when it comes to HUD?
Absolutely. This is Drew in Newark again. I mean, the fair housing regs, if there's talk, the Westchester County Executive, which had serious fair housing challenges, if he gets named, he's a close friend of Trump, we'll have immense fair housing challenges rolled back. And at the same time, just funding overall, whether it's the National Housing Trust Fund, Section 8, public housing funding is going to get cut even more. In Newark right now, we're in a big battle over the preservation of some of our public housing, and work's going to get more challenging, I think, at this moment. So it's definitely a huge fight.
Okay. Wanted to let Kathy get in. She was trying to share, and I think you were muted. Kathy, you there? Okay. Kathy's going to have to call back in. I'm going to switch us over to our another question that we have been. Oh, go ahead.
Darna, I just wanted to see, I feel like we've actually heard from a lot of folks on the coast so far, and wondering if there's folks in the South or in the Midwest or in the Southwest who haven't really shared, because I think it would be important to kind of hear the pulse of the ground from some other parts of the country as well.
Hey,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Ray from 9 to 5, Colorado. I was just about to talk, so that was good timing. So, yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of folks are saying, I think a lot of the residents we're working with, it's been a big blow, and I'm trying to, I don't know, we're trying to really kind of find our power again and make sense out of things. One good win we had locally was we increased the minimum wage to $12 an hour by 2020. Obviously not enough, but a first step, since it's been about 10 years since Colorado raised the minimum wage, and it was a ballot initiative. So a lot of our grassroots organizations worked real hard to make sure that people were voting for that. In terms of, because we do want to overturn the ban on rent control in Colorado, which means we'd have to change the constitution. And unfortunately, there's a ballot measure that did pass that basically makes it a lot harder to change the constitution. It just like creates more barriers in order to put something on the ballot. Like you just need a lot more approval from every precinct. So that's kind of pretty unfortunate. And our state Senate and House are kind of the same as they were last session. So like majority Republican in the Senate, majority Democrats in the House. And last year it was just really hard to pass any of our labor bills that we were working on. So still also a little bit unfortunate, but one thing that I think could be really good is, that doesn't really have to do with elections, but there's an organization called Rock USA, not to be confused with a restaurant organization. So this stands for Resident Owned Communities USA. They only work in mobile home parks. What they do is they buy mobile home parks and sell it directly to the residents, give them a 110% loan in 30 years to pay back. It depends on what the residents want in terms of payment. So some of the rocks that we've talked to are paying like $200 a month, which for a mobile home park is really awesome because some of our people right now are paying $900 a month. So they're actually going to have an affiliate finally in Colorado. They've never had one before here, and a lot of our folks are being threatened with being displaced, and most mobile homes aren't actually mobile, so their homes would essentially be destroyed and taken from them. So I'm still learning more about this organization. I know some of their funding comes from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, so that's kind of weird. But it's a little weird, but most of their funding comes from the Ford Foundation, and Neighborhood Works and someone else. So it sounds like, the majority is coming from better places. But, and if anyone on it, like, it sounds like a lot of folks are from the East Coast. I know they're very heavy in New Hampshire. They have like 120 resident-owned communities there, and I'm still trying to kind of see what that process is like for residents, especially communities of color. But at this point, it seems better than those folks just being displaced without getting any relocation money at all. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It looks like we had Nancy come back in. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and then I also have Kathy in a queue here. Are you back with us, Kathy? I'm not sure if your audio is.
I am.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I think I was talking to myself. I was unmuted. I was like, oh, there's okay. So we're talking to our members, our rent stabilized tenants in Tenantown, and then we'll be talking to our Queensbridge public housing base and our youth. And then I think the general sense is like they're just shocked that this country is that racist. But I guess they didn't think it was possible. And they were more disgusted by that than the policies itself, which we're hoping to work with them to understand what the policies are, which is actually a good thing. They're not afraid, and that's important to us in order for us to be able to organize and respond and still push through what we've been fighting for. And I was, I think saying earlier, it'd be helpful, and I was, I've been going to a bunch of meetings just to gather information of what is realistically possible, because the one piece about him and deporting so many people, like, he doesn't have the resources to actually do that. The other piece about like Social Security, it's actually, I've been reading different points or different views on what he actually will do with Social Security and food stamps. And it'd be helpful if, I think, around the housing piece, if there's like a fact sheet to understand what's going to happen with HUD, like the different scenarios, like one, realistically, what he can actually do and what Congress proposes to do, what Paul Ryan has said that he wants to do, and then realistically, like through the legislature, how can they be pushed back, and just so that I think it clears the clouds. There's a lot of haze right now and people are afraid. And if we can clear that and give the reality of what can really happen, then we can better organize with the sense of like a clear path. And I think the other piece is how I've been able to get through the last few days and being there for our members, and who will be so severely impacted in our base and our staff and our members, is really don't let the fear and paralyze us, because a lot of stuff, I think, what's being spewed right now, even within our movements, like I'm done with Sean King's tweets, like it's scaring people, and we can't let that keep us from hiding, even though the fear is real. And I think I was sharing with folks, like I realized the other day, when we were being threatened, harassed by Peter Liang's supporters, the best way to feel better was just having control of situations and, going to self-defense classes, and having that clarity just really puts ease, like without being hyper vigilant.
Good. I want to make sure folks check out the chat box, because some folks are sharing some resources in there. I wanted to go back and see if Nancy was still around and wanted to talk. Okay. I'm going to move to another question and thought. And if you are on the screen, we're going to throw up some more questions here. Given the terrain, the shift in terrain, some of the questions that were floating around, I know, it's facing race and just the aftermath of all this, was really around, is organizing for land and housing justice and against gentrification strategic now? And if so, why? Because we would like to hear from folks and how it's affecting you and your thinking around organizing in land and housing. There was an overarching question about, is this the time for us to look at even deeper roots causes of gentrification and displacement? Right to the City has an explicit racial anti-capitalist lens through which we do this work. And so look beyond housing when we're talking about gentrification and displacement fights, and what can be strategic, and if so, and why? Anyone want to take a stab at answering this question? Go ahead, Kathy. You look like you want to say it.
You see my mouth opening. I was struggling with that question, but I think right now, a lot of locally in New York, we're trying to gather to see how we use this as a moment to push our administration to be even more progressive than they say they are. For de Blasio, we mean in here in New York. And that and with the housing agenda, like we can't risk people losing their homes now more than ever. And that's the framing that we're going to enter in these spaces with administration because a lot of the plans in New York have been very pro-development and not real affordable housing, and very, very limited in preservation, which we care about the most. And so if de Blasio and what we're hearing from our governor is like we're going to protect our people, then we're going to hold you to that. Like in order to protect our people, it means we have to protect our homes, and we have to focus more on the preservation piece of what we already have.
Okay. Hi, welcome. I want to chime in. I remember being in Atlanta and being a part of a conversation where people said, you know, our Midwestern states, now is the time to be more active than ever, because this shift in terrain really puts land and housing, it allows for openings and opportunities for us to think of this not just being a people of color issue, that because of this shift, we're going to expose how land and housing is hurting those very people that think they're fighting against us. They're going to need to stand up and fight with us. And so there might be opportunities for other organizing to happen in those non-urban centered places. And I know we have some folks on the call who are from the Midwest, my home, yay, nice to see you. But if you could share with us how your community is thinking about this shift in terrain and how it may be placing land and housing justice differently in the fights that you're doing.
Hey, this
Anyone?
is in Detroit.
Hi, Aaron. Nice to see your face.
Nice to see you too, and everybody. Yeah, I haven't been speaking because I just kind of have a lot of conflicting, contradictory thoughts going. But what you said about the Midwest and the particular opportunity here reminds me of something that came up at the Grounded Solutions Network, or the CLT conference this year, which was the idea of, well, two things. One, I'm just thinking a lot more about like, what does solidarity look like right now? And what does it mean to really walk that talk of taking care of each other in really powerful and tangible ways? One of the reasons I've thought about that a lot is that being on Facebook, which I'm trying to do a lot less of lately, I'm just seeing like so much vitriol within the left toward one another. Like somebody doesn't have the exact same political analysis, and immediately like they become as much of an enemy as Trump, right? Like people literally spend twice as much time attacking people who almost essentially agree with them, and like never call their Congress people, aren't actually organizing, right? So we spend all this time tearing each other apart. I'm just a lot more curious about what it would look like to actually take care of each other and build those relationships hyper locally that are resilient to the attacks that we know are coming. And then also on a bigger level with respect to the Midwest, this idea that came up, and also the South, places where land has been seriously devalued. Like, what would national solidarity in the housing and land justice movement look like, where, you know, we could buy whole city blocks in Detroit for less than $1 million, right? Like, there's a real estate developer who bought over 2,000 acres, 200 acres, for $600,000 to build a tree farm. Like, that could actually be community-controlled land, and we have opportunities in places like Jackson and Detroit and other post-industrial Rust Belt cities to have a scale of impact right now in like a quickly closing window to buy and control land and then figure out what to do with it as part of a national movement for community control. But I think also, what's the case is that in a lot of these cities, I know in Detroit too, like the amount of resources there are for like organizational capacity tend to be less. So thinking about what it would look like to actually support such a process to be successful is something I haven't really done yet, but I'm interested in talking to more folks about.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. One of the things you touched on was, talking about resources, and there are models out there, you all probably talked about them as grounded solutions, where the community pulls its money together and provides some of that funding to either initially purchase land right out or act as a subsidy for folks to keep housing permanently affordable. So this might be an opportunity for those types of models to grow and have some meat and teeth in being able to keep land and housing out of the speculative market. Anyone else want to chime in on this question of, given the shift in terrain, is organizing for land, housing justice, and against gentrification strategic now? And if so, or if not, why? And share.
Hi, this is Jorge from Long Beach. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jorge. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great.
Good.
Well, okay.
Well, yeah, given the circumstances, right. Well, I think that one of the biggest opportunities that I see here is because looking at sort of everything, all the fear that's sort of blanketing our communities, and most of the communities that we work with are going to be impacted by this new presidency. And I think one of the greatest opportunities that I see here is to start reaching out to organizations that intersect with housing, such as immigrant rights groups, sort of like Black Lives Matter, or because we're going to see a lot more policing, a lot more, I think, increase of jailing some of our people of color. So the groups that are working towards some of the policing justice issues, the immigrant rights issues, I think we have a great opportunity to really start developing relationships with intersectional organizations, and then really. So when we're talking about what does this solidarity look like, I think it's going to be more intersectional than it was before, because their movements are predicated on the same folks that we're trying to keep in homes. And if we can't keep them in homes, their movements are going to be equally impacted, just as ours are. So I think that now is the time to start having those conversations about how it's important to retain our residents in their homes so that we can create stability and build power from that. Because if we continuously lose our folks because of all these policies that are going to come down, and they're going to come down, so let's just be real about that we really need to start having these conversations and how it's more important now than ever that we start building coalitions throughout the intersectional work that overlaps.
All right. Thank you for that, Jorge. That is a perfect segue into my next kind of question 2B, around, what is the role of Homes for All and Right to the City in this period? And what are some strengths that contribute to a broader movement? And so those intersections of the cross sectors of work, is that a place for Homes for All? And is that a role that we should play in this work, knowing that land and housing has been strategic for us in looking at fighting displacement right at the core, right at the cusp of what is needed for our communities on the ground. But now, thinking about strategic partnerships and strategic alliances, what is the role of Homes for All and Right to the City in this period or in this transition? And then what are some strengths that we think we can contribute to the broader movement? Not sure if you have that question up on there, Malcolm, or not.
No, it was kind of the follow-up question. So.
Ah, okay, cool.
Yeah, I wanted to speak quickly to something that Jorge said, and I think some other folks have been chatting about. And Darnell, you actually, in a conversation we had recently, I think there's a real, when I've thought about this question, I'm not 100% clear on it. You know, I think that when we talk about housing justice as solely the fight for individual homes or homes, I think we have to really critique and be self-reflective about the way the political terrain is shifting. That I guess I have open questions about how much that's able to contribute to building a broader political movement that can push back against Trump and Trump's forces, right? But I think this question of well, particularly around gentrification and mass displacement, and really, as Jorge was talking about, like being clearer and thinking better about how we connect our work and our movement for community control of land, and particularly this question of land, to with other movements and with other sectors. I think there's lots of opportunities to bring folks in to a connected movement through some of the anti-displacement work that we're doing, but that there's a need for us to be more clear about aligning and showing up and organizing alongside indigenous communities that are fighting for land, right? And are going to be under deeper threat because of kind of a 100%, if not there wasn't already, but 100%, federal government support behind, huge pipeline projects. And somebody was saying on a call I was on last night, like that's one of the few ways that Trump might be able to deliver on his jobs message, right? Is to pour money and support into, these kind of climate killing and jobs programs that are also going to attack indigenous land, and that his plan for quote unquote Black America and quote unquote urban America is to increase police and decrease regulation on private capital into blighted and under-resourced neighborhoods, right? And we know that means gentrification, right? So the threats are clear, and aligning more clearly with the way that deportation is going to continue to be one of the major ways that our communities are displaced and divided. And so I think that there's my thoughts on this question are both. I think yes, that housing and land justice organizing is strategic, but that there's real opportunities or need for us to be assessing how clearly are we doing that work in alignment with other movements and with other sectors.
Cool. Thank you for that. Okay. Any other thoughts on terrain or this movement, and what is our role in this now, and what should be a role for us now? Oh, thank you, Malcolm.
This is Andrea.
Hi, Andrea. Welcome.
Hi. So one of the things we've been thinking of, and this might be a role for Right to City or Homes for All or just the tenant movement in general, that in the immediate, that as part of some of the demonstrations during the inauguration time, that we show up as tenants, as Trump is a landlord and his son-in-law still has property in New York and is a very bad landlord in New York. And then we show up as sort of the tenant movement. that we're in solidarity, and we know the tenants in our movement are also going to be affected by all the other plans that Trump has.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead.
So for 8 Homes for All Rights to the City role, I think us being a national alliance, I think what's interesting is that I had Rachel Matt on last night, and she was talking about how on a government website, Trump was like promoting all his properties, and like Melania Trump was promoting her jewelry. But that like he was really promoting his real estate property all over the country, and like Kushner, you know, like it's a big problem in New York, but I imagine like Trump is just a big problem in real estate across the country. And if there's a way in this space for Right to City playing a role to uplift that message on a national scale, like you know, how do we it is mind-blowing, you know, like on a government website where he's just like bragging about his properties. I'm not really clear yet, but I just like, you know, like, but pointing that out is a big thing.
Yeah, it is.
Can folks hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Alejandro.
Yeah. So this is Alejandro from Chicago, from the Autonomous Tenants Union. Just reflecting on the conversation that has happened thus far. You know, we're a relatively new organization. We're struggling right now in building a base, and I think you know, these are just thoughts. You know, nothing conclusive on my end, but I think there's going to be a lot of temptation to be a part of a lot of mobilizations that are going to happen in reaction to what Trump is doing and what, you know, he will do, right? But I think, I don't know, things have been moving in a certain direction, and under Obama, deportations skyrocket. You know, no other president has deported more people. And, you know, the militarization of the police has been a huge pattern under the Democrats. And so it's been moving in a certain direction. And if we get tempted to deviate, to participate in a lot of mobilization in reaction instead of, you know, digging deep and continuing our organizing work of building a base, then I feel like we're going to be constantly in a position of weakness. So that's just my thoughts for now. You know, I thought I'd share.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. There was a lot of good talk here. I'm going to transition over and get ready to turn this over to, I believe it's Tony up next. There's a lot of good discussion going on in the chat box as well. Folks are putting some things in, and so feel free to add some more to the conversation. I know that some of us on staff at Right to the City are also sharing some documents and things of just readings, some inspirational readings, as well as some challenging things around what to do next and how can we do things next. So if you have some readings or things you want to share, feel free to either put it in the chat box or email any of us on staff with your thoughts, because we'd like to be able to share and talk with folks. So Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us through the next portion of this call.
We actually have 5 more minutes, Darnell.
Oh, we got 5 more minutes. Okay. Is anyone on the call from the Southwest? I tried to scroll through here, and I'm not recognizing names of where folks really are. Be interested to hear what that part of the country is thinking and feeling and reacting to. We're talking about, given the shift in terrain, is land and housing justice and against gentrification strategic now? And then what could be or should be the role of Homes for All and Right to the City, and our major contribution to this period looking ahead? I'll chime in with something I know I heard. There was a large, in Atlanta facing race, there were several different large coalitions and large formations that were there. And one of the things that kept coming up in a lot of the breakout spaces was the need to think about sanctuary havens and sanctuary spaces. And then that was juxtapositioned with the fact that we don't have spaces and shelters right now for people. And so how do we network within our communities and our organizations to provide safe places for people? And is that a role in this housing justice work that we should be uplifting more? And is that strategic now to be uplifting that and helping us in this gentrification fight? Anybody? Okay. I'm not seeing anything new to the conversation in this area. So am I okay and clear to hand this off? Yay, I'm going to hand it off. How about that? I love y'all. As I was sharing with folks at the beginning of this section of the discussion, Right to the City's leadership and steering committee is, getting ready to come into some retreat space where we're going to be sharing and talking about all of these issues. And part of that is also thinking about the next set of projects or things we can encourage our base groups to think about in introducing Homes for All to some new spaces, because as folks remember, this original call was a space for new Homes for All partners to come and get oriented. And so that orientation still will be happening, but at the same time, we want to be responsive and reflective with our current groups around what's going on the ground. So Tony is going to take us into thinking about some of the stuff that staff and leadership have hurriedly put together in the wake of what happened last week. Take it away, Tony.
Great. Thanks, Darnell. How y'all doing? Can y'all hear me?
We can.
Beautiful. Malcolm, can we hit the next slide? Wonderful. So y'all, I think we definitely felt it was critical to have this call sooner rather than later. I think we also are very clear that, one call is not enough. So I think we wanted to share a little bit about our thinking of the process over the next few months and to see what y'all think about it. And if it makes sense, if y'all are thinking other things. But we really want to look, a few months ahead and really be thinking what we should be doing. So basically, we're thinking that we need to be very deliberate about embarking on a listening project. And that's really based on being straight up with ourselves that this is a moment that most of us have never experienced. It's a traumatic, tragic moment in many ways. It's big things are shifting. So we feel that it's critical that we step back and start listening to each other, reaching out to our members, to our families, to allies, to really share and support and learn as much as we can from each other. And not just for the sake of supporting each other and understanding the moment for that sake, but really with the understanding that we want this to inform our goals and strategies for the next 3 years. I think the other assumption we're working on is that the election of Trump and the rise of white nationalism is big enough that we need to reconsider and relook at our goals and strategies and not blindly move forward with the ones we have set. So with that said, we're really calling for a listening project. I'll also say we're not saying that we should halt all activity and just listen. I think what we're saying is a listening project should be a priority and a key part of our work over the next few months. At the same time, we understand that we have no choice, and the moment calls for us to seriously, aggressively resist and protest and take direct action, not just symbolically, but also to disrupt society as much as possible. So it's not in that absence, but we feel also we do have a tendency to, when big things happen, just to get in the streets and react and resist without understanding fully the moment.
Uh-oh. Tony, did we lose you? We lost you.
Tony.
Stop.
Tony. Tony, you seem to be muted on your end.
And he can't hear us, but he is just steadily talking. Hi, Tony.
Tony, we're not sure why. Can you hear us? Tony?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Let's see then. So, Tony, are you able to see if you can troubleshoot? I don't think he can hear us. All right.
I mean, you crack me up.
Well, Tony tries to figure this out. So there's some key questions that we've drafted as kind of wanting to take the pulse. And we wanted to kind of see what you all think about these questions. These are basically the questions that frame today's conversation. Go ahead, Tony, if you're back. Nope. Tony, you may have to hang up and call back in because it's not working. So the questions are up on the screen, but for folks on the phone, in this round of really engaging with folks locally, and this is not just like national staff engaging with you all, it's also wanting to make sure that we're reaching deep into our base and into our strength. So checking in with folks, how are people doing? How are you understanding and feeling the political moment? That shouldn't say movement, that should say moment. What's the pulse on the ground with folks in your community, right? How are folks starting to engage with each other? What are the ideas and plans that are emerging moving forward? And then this broad question of I think it's today's call was a clear start. Tony, you want to go ahead?
Yes. So we're on the key.
Well,
Can you hear me
on
now?
to key questions number 3.
Okay. Okay, great. Sorry about that, y'all. Don't know what happened. So the third key question that we feel is critical to grapple with is land and housing strategic now? So we clearly have been operating based on the understanding that land and housing is very strategic for our movement, for our communities, for our members. Given the shifts and the election of Trump, we want to re-ask that question. And is it strategic now, given the shifts? If so, why? So be very clear why it's strategic. I think we've heard some thinking on this call already. And then based on that, what is our role given where we are and given our focus on land and housing? And we think it's important to really think about our strengths, think about where we're at, and how that can contribute to what we need to do over the next 3 years. I think definitely, some of what we've been doing in our fundamental strategy around translocal strategy of building locally, focusing on base building and leadership development, and connecting strategically across communities, cities, with common work, that could make a lot of sense to continue and double down on over the next 3 years. So we really want to be asking that in terms of informing what happens over the next 3 years. So I think one thing we'd love to hear from y'all is, are these the right questions to be asking, right? Because it's very important that we're asking the right questions and then coming back together to dialogue around them. Are these the right questions? Do you think there's other key questions we should be including in the mix if all of these aren't the right questions? So I want to open it up and really hear from y'all on what you think.
Hi, this is Karen from CPA Boston. So I have a very brief answer to that. I haven't really thought through. I think that, land and housing is still strategic, and because we're going to see that a lot of our safety net is going to be taken away, and I think it's really important for us to kind of be louder around kind of what are some of the basic needs that we all have the right to. And I think housing is one of them.
And Karen, are you feeling that these questions are the right questions to bring back to your community members to dialogue around? Or are there other questions we should also be asking and diving into?
What is this thing?
I think that we are yeah, I think these are the questions. Actually, tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. That one it is. How did you get that? This isn't a scam or something?
No. It's
Sorry about that, y'all. Somebody asked to be unmuted. So, Karen, hold on. We're going to unmute you again.
Hi. This is funny. So, yeah, these are the questions that we're asking. Actually, tomorrow we're having a president's meeting, and one of the key questions that we want to talk about is that, what are some of the demands in specific public parcels? In that, and one of the key discussion we're talking about is like, in this moment, why would be community control and ownership of land is especially important, given that, all the resources may be taken away by the federal government.
Really helpful, Karen. And other folks, what do y'all think about these questions?
Someone else was going to share? Fred, I'm going to, folks, I'm going to unmute everyone because I'm trying to make sure that Fred can speak. But if you are talking, if you can mute yourself.
Yeah.
Or is it better if we do it by?
Fred, go ahead.
Can people hear me?
I think
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we can put it today so she can put the order for Friday, I think.
Okay. Do you still have money in your child
Hello?
support?
I think so.
Okay, maybe we can use that one.
Hey, Isaac, I think that's you. Isaac, can you mute yourself?
Hello?
Go ahead, Fred.
Hello? Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I'm sorry. So, you know, here at DARE, I'm here with Malchus Mills, one of our members, and we had other members here earlier, but as you all know, we do more than just housing, eviction defense, and those sort of things. We also have a and resisting mass incarceration, and we are looking at possibly shifting some of the, in addition to the work that we're doing, I don't think that what we're doing right now is enough. We have folks who are going to be persecuted in our communities, undocumented immigrants. So we are now trying to build with other local groups some kind of network of protection. And we're also going to be working with other groups to pass city and state policies that reverse what Trump tries to do. So if he tries to pass, if he gets Obamacare, then that's universal single-payer health care at the state level. If he tries to put more money into persecuting undocumented immigrants, that's becoming a sanctuary city and becoming a sanctuary state. There's several things that we are now going to have to shift to additional to our campaigns. With our campaigns, we can do some intersectional work, but it's definitely not business as usual for us. You all hear me?
Yep.
Yep. That's really helpful, Fred. And I think that brings up, we may want to have an explicit additional question, to say, understanding that even for those who do feel land and housing is strategic and that we must continue it, that understanding the new terrain and understanding there is going to be serious attacks and persecution on immigrants, on Black communities. There is going to be a big question of how do we relate to those attacks and those other sectors of the movement? How do we connect in new ways, etc.? I've heard some people talk about we do eviction defense. Well, there's deportation defense. How do those things come together, right? So I think we may want an additional question saying, and how do you see our land and housing movement relating differently to other movements? So that's very helpful, Fred. Any other questions, y'all, or thoughts? Are these the right questions? Are we missing questions? Because this is what we're going to be encouraging folks to dialogue around. So when we come back together, we can continue the discussion, but around common questions. Okay. Good. And if y'all have other ideas as you go back and talk to your members, if y'all are like, hey, this is a critical question that we didn't talk about, then you can share it with us and we can get it back out in the mix. So it's not like now or never. I wanted to share on two levels what we are envisioning and thinking about with the Listening Project. One, locally, Dawn has mentioned this idea that we really love, the idea of kitchen table conversations. So understanding we need to have conversations with existing spaces within our organization, with membership meetings, leadership spaces, etc. But we may need to create new spaces, kitchen table conversations that go a little broader than our membership, right? And maybe to membership families, right? But to get out in the community and have more discussions. Also, I think with allies, given that different sectors are going to be impacted differently. we need to be talking to our allies to see what they're thinking, what they're doing, and how we can connect. So we definitely think that's going to be a priority over the next few months. We think nationally, one thing we're thinking is all our existing spaces, which we have a lot, we don't need to create a lot of new spaces. We use existing spaces, shift the focus of those spaces to take on this dialogue and take on this discussion and really help inform what immediate resistance should look like and what our 3-year goals and strategies should look like. Just to remind folks, and for newer folks, our regular spaces are monthly translocal committee calls. That's kind of the heart and soul of Homes for All, where our different translocal committees, which include renters' rights, our home, our land, around community land trust, and development without displacement. Folks get together, usually talking about their campaigns and strategy, that the committees need to take time to discuss this. We are having a retreat with the Right to the City Steering Committee and the staff in early December. This will be a focus of the retreat, and actually what we're learning on this call and between now and the retreat will inform it deeply. The anchors, so the coordinators of each of the committees, have 2 calls, one in December, one in January set. This will be a key topic on those calls. And as you know, we are having our first national online assembly with hundreds of members from our different partner groups around the country. So we are now re-looking at that and want to adjust the agenda based on this new context. So we will be re-looking at that and figuring out what makes the most sense for the online assembly. The other thing we wanted to share is different folks have been lifting up readings that we found helpful in understanding the moment. So we started just to collect them. So we encourage y'all to check out this bit.ly where you can see different readings we've collected, which a lot of them are very helpful. We also want y'all to share readings that y'all have, which could be statements or articles that your own organization has written, or things you've come across that are really insightful. Please add them to this list. So I want to stop there and just ask people, in terms of process, what the next few months looks like in terms of locally and nationally. Is what we're thinking in terms of these spaces for listening and dialogue, does that make sense? Or other things, what else are y'all thinking about needs to happen over the next few months that we all should be thinking about? Don't be shy. I want to hear y'all's thoughts.
We can see folks smiling.
So has anyone had local discussions about what the next month looks like? You know, some of the immediate thinking of what you're going to be doing in terms of processing what's happening and how you're going to do it. It'd be good to hear from each other about that. And I see Karen has shared in the chat box that they're feeling political education is going to be an important part of what needs to happen. Karen, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing there is, as people do political education, it will be wonderful to share what you're doing with each other. So maybe if someone has developed some good political curriculum for the moment, we can share it and other people can use it. And then certainly it's going to be important to hear what comes out of those trainings and those dialogues. And that go ahead.
I was just gonna, we're past 4:30, so we want to make sure we're respecting time. But any last thoughts on process, or before we move to a quick closing inspiration?
And Malcolm, the other thing I want to bring up for people is, as people are having the dialogues and trying to understand the moment, we do need to figure out how to come back and share with each other what's happening locally, so we can learn across city, across state. We don't have that all figured out, so we're going to be making some suggestions of what are the most efficient ways to share information, so we don't just get thousands of emails. So we'll be making some suggestions like we're doing with the collective space for readings, maybe some collective spaces where we can share our thoughts. So we'll be in touch with y'all on that. And if y'all have ideas, please let us know.
All right. So want to thank everybody. Tony, I think that's right on. I think some of these suggestions about kind of different materials and pulling from other spaces as well. And I think getting some feedback on some of these key questions, just getting a sense from you all on right, really leaning into our strength, our local strength, our broad memberships, kind of power at the grassroots level, and doing this listening. So I think the hope is to be able to put out some guidance and suggestions to frame some of these key questions, and to be supporting and engaging each other and having these conversations. And it's not to say that we haven't been having these conversations, but that we really want to be, this moment calls for really deep engagement in this time. Somebody is calling somebody. Tony, is that you?
No.
Welcome, Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer is available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1.
All right. Not sure what was going on there. So thank you all for so much participation, so much sharing. We want to hear from folks who didn't get a chance to share or who weren't able to get on. I think we'll be gauging with folks about whether there's the need for more spaces like this in particular. And just to close out, want to leave with some closing inspiration and grounding. So feel free to stick around for this last closing bit.
You believe in freedom, cannot rest until it. You believe in freedom, cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. You believe in freedom, cannot rest until the killing of black men. Black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men. White mother sons, you believe in freedom and not sing it with me if you like. You believe in freedom and not rest until the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can put shed some light, I say, carry us through the gate. We believe in freedom and I rest. Let me talking to you. We believe in freedom and I rest until now. And struggling myself don't need a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to spread a red light is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I'm supposed to be heard. At times I can be quite difficult about no man's word. Believe in freedom, and I live. Let me talk until we hear, believe in freedom, and knowledge until. Not needing so much more power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in a number rising and against tyranny. We believe in freedom and not let. Oh, we believe in freedom and not let.
I can take her. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending time this afternoon. And, you know, these are such critical conversations to continue to be in. We'll be calling you. You should call us. You should call each other. We should keep on being in dialogue and connection because we need it now more than, oh, we need it now. I'm not going to say more than ever. We need it.
Bye-bye.
Peace, y'all.